neuromyelitis optica or neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder has been a difficult to treat neurological condition recognized over a century ago. And, you know, it's a discrete disease entity from multiple sclerosis, although it does share some of the clinical overlap with MS. It's not exactly the same disease. In fact, it has its own different pathology and different biology. And we haven't had any treatments that have been proved or approved, you know, so proved therapies that have been approved until very, very recently. And so now we have two drugs that have approval. So I think this is big news for our NMO patients. And, you know, it's very important to be able to have therapies which are of known quantifiable value, that have gone through the rigors of randomized controlled trials and have received, you know, appropriate regulatory approval. I think this is transformative for patient care. And if you think about other rare diseases, you know, not so long ago for MS, for example, lots of different things were being used in clinical practice up to the point when interferon was first introduced. And since then, we've had multiple therapies come forward, and it's really transformed the face of multiple sclerosis so that people now who live with MS have a far better chance of having a normal life. And I would like to say that we're going to achieve the same kinds of success for NMO, a disease that is more disabling than MS, associated with greater risk of mortality. And I believe these new treatments that have come through are really going to make a big difference. So I can talk about Inebilizumab or Inebilizumab in a very straightforward way. I mean, it's very similar to other B-cell depleting monoclonal antibodies in that it's administered by intravenous infusion twice a year. It's very well tolerated. In fact, compared to placebo, it has about the same amount of likelihood of having an infusion reaction. So it's a very well tolerated drug. It's very effective. It reduces the risk of having an attack by 77% in the AQP4 seropositive patients. And when you really drill down into the data, there are other features of it which I think are quite interesting. Prevents hospitalizations as well. And these are the core features of the label approved by the FDA. When you review the clinical trial data, there's also compelling evidence for an impact on disability associated with NMO. There's also an impact on radiographic disease activity as well. These are features that didn't make it into the FDA label, at least at this time, but they're there in the trial data, and that it has been published in the Lancet. So I think that, you know, overall, it's a very appealing package. You also mentioned the preceding drug that was approved a couple of years ago, eculizumab, and I can tell you a little bit about my personal experience with that. We haven't treated too many patients with the drug, in part because of the frequency of administration of that product, which is every 2 weeks. There's initially a loading dose once a week for several weeks, and then patients get the infusions every 2 weeks. And for many patients, that's just too much to handle, right? So we've been using that drug in patients who have severe refractory disease, much in the way that the clinical trial was set up. And so we only have a couple patients who are on the drug, but that drug works very well too, very impressive level of efficacy. In fact, both of these products are incredibly impressive when it comes to medical treatments. Anything that is achieving, you know, 77 to 92% efficacy is fantastic. You know, it's really clinical efficacy. That's not on a radiographic endpoint or some biomarker. That's actually making an impact. Fantastic, major step forward for clinical care of patients with both of these products.